Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for the next episode of the Jason's Take On. Today, we're going to be talking about customer success as a growth engine, and we're really excited about this topic and think it's one that you guys will enjoy as well. Just a couple of quick things to kick us off. This is a live podcast, so we will be recording it, but there will be no slides. We're trying to keep this fast and easy, and we're targeting about a max of 45 minutes for today's episode, including time for some Q&A. So probably about 30 minutes of discussion and then some Q&A. As we go through, please go ahead and type your questions into the Q&A window as we go. We'd love to get your thoughts and your input, as well as if you have any comments, feel free to put those out as well too. And we'll probably get to those at the end, but you can type them in at any time. And also, this replay will be made available on YouTube and SoundCloud and a bunch of other podcast sites. So if you do enjoy it, please go ahead and share it with folks who you think might be interested and give us a like on the site of your choice. And also, just to let you know with this one, we do have a couple of additional resources that you can access. There is an article on competitive CS services that will be coming out, as well as a link to a guide that we put together for questions that buyers should be asking about customer success services to understand if they're competitive or not, and a few other things. So when we send the replay out, all of those resources will be in the descriptions, so you can go ahead and find those, and we hope you really enjoy those as well. So just a little bit about me to kick off. My name is Jason Whitehead, and I am the CEO of Tritons. We are a consulting and training company based in Washington, D.C., and obviously the co-host of the Jason's Take On. And also, I am co-founder of csmastermind.com, which is a subscription professional growth and development service for both early stage CS career professionals as well as current and aspiring CS leaders. So if you get a chance, please go ahead and check out csmastermind.com. We'd love to have you join us. I've been working in this space for over 20 years now and have worked with a variety of clients, both on the software side, helping to set up customer success teams and build them out and develop their strategies and train their teams, as well as I also work very closely with the buyers of software, helping them set up their own user adoption programs and internal success teams where they really make sure that they're driving adoption success within their own user population over the life of the system. So if there's ever anything you need around those areas, please go ahead and give me a shout. I'd always love to meet and connect with new people. And also wanted to let you know that I am doing a webinar coming up in October in association with Churn Zero. They'll be focusing on how to really rethink the onboarding process to help your own customers build out their internal success team. So if you haven't got a chance yet, just go to tritons.com under the calendar page. You'll see some links. I'd love to have you join me for that. So that's just a little bit about my background. And with that, I will turn it over to my co-host, Jason.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Really happy to be here with Jason. This is, I think, our 11th or 12th podcast. It's almost a year since we've started doing these, so really excited to be here again. Great to have you all joining us. Again, we've got a global audience, which is fantastic. Quick intro to myself. So I'm Jason Noble, based here in London. The other half of the Jasons, the non-US half. I am currently the VP of Global Customer Success for a US tech startup called Vinly. Vinly is in the connected cars, mobility, transportation space, a US-based software organization. I am building out their European operation and kicking off their global customer success function. So really exciting time for the business, exciting time for me. My background, very similar to Jason, I've worked with a range of different technology organizations as vendors, as partners across a range of different industries, different verticals. A lot of the time spent in media and fintech, but always with that focus on the customer. I think both of us kind of started off our careers that day before, or the time before it was called customer success, but we've always been doing kind of the same thing, driving value and successful outcomes for our customers. So really great to see it all coming together. As Jason said, we're talking today around customer success as a growth engine and how you build competitive CS services and how they help you as part of that, how customer success fits in as part of that. As always, we like everyone to think differently about this and be bold. And our Be Bold challenge for September for everybody, we'd love your feedback on this again in the LinkedIn and Twitter groups that we've got, is what can you do in the next month before our next podcast in October to get your executive leadership team to understand better that customer success is their next competitive battleground where they need to focus. So we'd love your thoughts. We'll share this again in LinkedIn, but please do let us know on that. And we will recap at the end the bold questions, some of the key things that we'd like you to take away from this. The key things really just summarizing it, how to develop and deliver fast, efficient, effective, and scalable CS services that beat the competition, how you market and bundle your competitive services, customer success services as a competitive differentiator to help accelerate that growth, and how do you capitalize on great customer success really to be that growth driver. So we'll recap on those at the end. I think as Jason said, we're going to do a few polls throughout the podcast. I think there's 3 that we've got, so we'd love your feedback. We'll talk through the results of that. And I will start us off. Jason, I'll kind of throw the question to you as to really why is this such an important topic when we're talking about customer success as a growth engine? What does it mean and why now?
Yeah, it's been really fun over the last few years to see customer success as a field, as a discipline mature and emerge. And I think, Jason, right now we're seeing a lot more people who've been in the space for a while really progress in their thinking and really have moved on so far in both, what their view of customer success is and the steps that they're taking. And I think there's just more of a greater understanding the need to focus on business outcomes and more than just buying a product and a service. And, one of the things that we're seeing also is that, buyers and investors are getting much more savvy about customer success services and the need to have them and the need to really focus on retention and generating business outcomes for customers so that they expand and so that they renew and hang out there. And, one of the things that we were talking about is that, if you're looking at a large enterprise customer, that has over, 2,000 employees or more, they typically have around 150 SaaS products in their organizations, and that when you think about that, that means they're exposed to potentially 150 different vendors and potentially 150 different customer success teams and different types of customer success services. So our buyers are starting to see a lot of different flavors of customer success because it still means a lot of different things and different vendors are providing different services as part of their offerings. And when you look at this, when you talk with buyers and when you talk with SaaS vendors, all this exposure to customers, they're seeing so many different things. They're really starting to learn that not all customer success services are created equal. And some deliver different amounts of value, some don't really deliver any value, and that they're realizing that a really high impact customer success service really can help them achieve more value than they possibly could on their own. And it really helps them to be more successful and really helps them to achieve the business goals that they want to. And they're also realizing that customer success services that really are not high impact or really just renamed customer support or customer service, they're not really delivering what the customer wants. So buyers are getting much more savvy. And as you think about this, you start to look at it, one of the things we hear all the time is my customers won't give me time. They won't get on the phone with me. They won't engage with me, and I'm trying to add value to them, but I can't even get their time. And we're realizing that customers are quickly realizing that they're not going to waste their time on your service or with you if they don't perceive the value. And I think that's really something that's really important here is, you're not just fighting for the wallet share, buying the product. You're fighting for calendar share. You're fighting for mind share. You're trying to get their time and their efforts so that they engage with you. And with everyone so busy today, I think we're realizing that the only way you're going to get that is if you can quickly prove your value as a customer success professional, and if you can prove the value that your CS service delivers. So I think that's one of the big issues here. And I think as we think about this and customers are realizing, oh, I've got to be very selective of where I spend my time, but also they're now backtracking and realizing more and more that as a buyer, I need to look at just more than just the product. I need to look at this bundle of services as well too to see what's going to really deliver the value I need. So I think that's one of the big reasons. And I think to that end, one of the resources we did want to share with everyone is the free software buyer's guide to customer success services. And I just put that in the link if you want to go and download that as well, and it will be in the follow-up. But it really does provide, a scoring mechanism and 35 key questions that your customers are probably going to be asking you at some point in some flavor that if you're a SaaS vendor, you should ask yourself these same questions. How would I rate myself? And am I being competitive? So take a look at that and let us know your thoughts. But so that's some of my perspective on this. Jason, what are some of your thoughts on why now and why this is so important?
I think you've covered some really, really key things there, and the landscape is shifting completely. And I think you've hit on that key challenge about how you get people's time when they're seeing the growth in the number of CS teams that are trying to engage with them, and it makes it really difficult. I think there's a quote that I'm going to quote you here, Jason, because you kind of hinted to it earlier on, but customers are buying value and buying outcomes. They're no longer just buying and looking at your product. They're looking at your total solutions. And I think that's something that is definitely shifted, and we're seeing an even bigger shift to continue around that. And they're looking at a combination of what your product delivers, the technology, the features, your professional services, and ultimately the outcomes and the value and the customer success that you're delivering. So they're looking at everything. It isn't just about products, and it's very few services are now just off the shelf. They want to understand the value and how they're going to get that value from the product. So what people are buying has actually changed. We need to be very wary of this. And I think you can see this both as a threat and as an opportunity. On the opportunity side, if you are building out and delivering really robust, efficient, and very good customer success services, and you're proving and demonstrating the value of the services, improving your ability to deliver outcomes and value to your customers, and you're doing it faster and better than competitors and your vendors, other suppliers, you will win. The opportunities there are huge. Your customer sees and they get more value for you. There's advocacy that comes in. Your opportunity and growth with individual customers is just going to grow. And that's really going to give you a significant advantage over competitors that aren't doing it at that right level. I think on the flip side, though, the risks and the threat around this, if you can't deliver a high impact service and you cannot quickly deliver the value and outcomes your customers want, you will fall behind what the competition are doing or what the marketplace are doing in terms of customer success. And you will lose out as a result of that. So you've really got to look at the two situations here and look at, how do I take advantage of this as an opportunity, and how can I drive that value for my customers, but also what's the threat here, and how do I make sure that I've got the right customer success team, the right customer success leadership structure in place, and buy-in and processes to make sure that we keep driving that. And I think that's really, really important. And as Jason said, there's an article that he's written around in the Software Business Growth magazine that we'll share after the podcast. And I think there's a lot of key information there to take. We are going to do our first poll now, so please do answer within the Zoom window. The first poll is here, so it's just popped up in front here. How often do your prospective customers ask you about your customer success services as a factor in their purchasing decision? So you're engaging with them. How often does customer success come up as something that your customers are asking? So we'll give you just a couple of seconds to fill that in. Okay, Jason, I'll let you talk through the results.
Yep, they're still coming in, but it looks like we have quite a few people who are not sure, they're just not involved in sales, and that's to be expected since there's still some handoffs there. I think it's interesting, sort of from a bell curve perspective, we're still seeing, about 38% or so are more of the infrequently. It's not happening there yet, but we do have, some people that are at, 50% of the time it's coming up, and increasingly it's coming up often. And I think, based on the conversations that I've been having with folks and what I'm seeing here, I think this is sort of the signs that we're still on the early edge of this, which is a great opportunity for folks who recognize that. But I suspect that if we ask this question again in a year, in 2 years, we're going to see a lot more people that's going to be often or almost always. So I think we're still early on, which is great, because if that's the case, this is really a great time to start working with your executives to point out, this is what's coming, let's get ahead of this trend. And let's really figure out how we can be more competitive and include CS as a sales differentiator and as a growth engine. So I think this is sort of my take on it. We'll go ahead and close the poll. Jason, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's actually really encouraging that we're seeing that kind of shift already, and it isn't skewed one way or the other. And I think we are seeing changes happening here. And I as a buyer, customers as a buyer, they understand that they want this value from the product, and they want a lot more. They don't just want to buy an off-the-shelf product, install it and go. They want to understand what the value is. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. As we see customer success grow and mature, we're going to see that shift become better and better. And it will be a key part of the sales cycle. It's something that you and I have talked about before in the podcast. That's a really cool start, that.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. We've got a couple more coming up. So Jason, I think this sort of lays the groundwork that if this is why we're talking about it's important, let's start with the first part there. How do you know that you have a competitive CS service offering?
I think it's such a great question and a big challenge at times, particularly if you look at the CS landscape, the customer success landscape, the different offerings from different organizations, the different levels of tiering, whether you pay for it or not. It really is all over the map in terms of the scope of services that people want, the people's services or the services that people are expecting, and are getting, so it makes it very difficult to benchmark against what good looks like. So I think the other challenges we've got around that is there are no standards around what customer success is. There are no market norms out there. And it means that it still means something very different to different organizations. As customers, it means something very different to different vendors. Yes, we're beginning to see it coming together, but we're not there yet. You're also seeing differences globally. The US traditionally has been far more mature in how they're using it than Europe, though that's fast changing there. But there are these differences that you've really got to take into consideration and understand that. But we are beginning to see the ideas of some best practice, some standards start to emerge. And I think that's a trend that we will continue to see. Now, I think with such a wide variety of services, you're going to find that your customers actually have a lot of variation, a lot of choice. And right now, they may not actually be fully evaluating the difference in customer success services that they're getting from different vendors or prospective vendors. But that works for us right now, where we can start setting the bar really high in terms of what we're delivering, the value we're delivering to them. But I think that will really change as customers begin to see more value that customer success as a discipline and a service, as a function of the business, can start to drive. And I think the poll there ties that up as well, is that vendors are going to start, not vendors, so customers are going to start asking more and more, what do you do about customer success? How are you doing it? And they'll gauge you against other organizations. So they'll be able to pick and choose the right ones. And I think we said earlier on, if you don't have a competitive customer success service now, if you don't have one, you absolutely need to start looking at it now and kickstart it and make sure you are really, it's got to be bleeding edge. You've got to be out there, get something started, understand what the market are doing, work with your customers, partner up with them. And that, I think, a shameless plug for the CS Mastermind services that Jason talked about earlier on. If you need help and guidance around that, you can look at it. There are coaching services that both Jason and I can do as well. But really kickstart that process there to start building up those services and start speaking to your peers, start speaking to the industry to understand what they are, make sure you're attending those events. I think you've got to make sure that you are continually delivering more value to your customer than they can get on their own. And that is critical. There's going to be a level that they will be able to achieve on their own, but you want to take them to that next level where they absolutely see the value as you, as a customer success organization, a customer success leader, that you bring to the organization. You've really got to make sure that you are delivering more value than their competitors through their customer success services. So there's just a couple of thoughts around there. I think, Jason, it kind of leads into a really nice next question, is how do you know what good looks like? You know, we've got big ranges in what the services are, a lot of challenges understanding how you look at a competitive landscape, but what does good actually look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's really important both for your own knowledge, but also to be able to really prove to customers. I think that really comes down to as well, too. If you're going to use CS services as that growth engine, you need to be able to know what it looks like. You've got to be able to prove to your customers that you have them. So, you know, here's some things that we think are helpful. You know, one, have you looked across at other organizations, sort of across the CS landscape, to really identify what are best practices and making sure that you're integrating them into your service? And I would offer a caution here too, is I think there's a lot of common practice out there that really is not best practice. And you know, there's some things that people have gotten really excited about, automations and other things, which, you know, they sound great, but they may not be as impactful. And if they're not done well, they may actually be hurting you. So just be careful and ask yourself the question, well, is this a common practice we're doing because everyone is, or is this really a best practice and we can prove the value of it? And I think related to that too, we have talked about how CS is still, even though it's moved a lot in the last 4 or 5 years, it's still very early days here. And I think, are you leading the charge in experimenting and creating new best practices? Are you pushing the envelope and being bold and doing new things? Because the problem of success, the problem of getting people to constantly drive adoption in this world of perpetual change, you know, getting people to constantly drive a success with evolving software and agile releases and everything coming out of the sun means you've got to be pushing the envelope. This is a new problem that people really haven't solved before. So we don't know yet what's really going to work. So get out there and try new things and experiment in a way that you can see if something is working and that you can prove the value. And then I think also that, you know, the proof is right there in, what are the results that your customers have seen, and what value have your customers get, and what sort of feedback can they give you to demonstrate that your CS efforts are having an impact? What value were they getting before you launched a CS service, and what are you getting now? You know, and I think also, as we talked about, your customers are comparing your CS services to that much broader competitive landscape. You're looking across, potentially 150 vendors at that enterprise level, and they're comparing what you do to everyone in their portfolio of suppliers, not just to people in your own area. So really, talk with them and look at across the wider CS landscape. So I think that's really important. So you need to be doing that as well too, and not just looking at what your immediate competitors are doing. So obviously, if you go head to head with the same software vendor for the same type of sale every time, you clearly want to know what they're doing as your rival for any given sale. But you do need to look at that bigger perspective. And Jason, one of the things that you and I were talking about, sort of like, if you're going traveling and you're saying, oh, I need to book a flight to get somewhere, you don't just look at the price of the flights and the alternative airlines, but then you start to say, oh, will I get a different value or a different experience? Should I take the train instead of flying? Is that even faster? Or take the ferry or driving? Sometimes, as I mentioned, just going from Washington, D.C. up to New York, yes, there are flights that leave and they're very quick flights and all that stuff, but from where I'm located to where I want to go downtown, it's often faster and easier to take the train. So the airlines are not just competing against other airlines, but they're competing against that larger alternative. What else are your customers looking at, both in terms of their product vendor or other service providers or things like that, that really say, are we being competitive here? And I think the big thing here is that, you've got to be able to prove it, the value. You can't just talk about it. Marketing is great and all that is important, but you've really got to be able to show the value. So those are just a couple of thoughts. Let's go ahead and move to our second poll real quick. And for this one, tell us, what do you do to ensure that your customer success service are market competitive? And just pick the best answer here. One is nothing. We really don't analyze our services in the marketplace, or we research the services offered by our immediate competitors and adjust our services accordingly. Or we could look at our immediate competitors and research services and best practices from vendors in other industry. And then we regularly experiment and develop cutting edge services to see what's best for our customers and what's working. So go ahead and just fill that in real quick. We'll give you a couple seconds to get your input, and then we'll go ahead and look at the results. Looks like we still have a few answers coming in. Thank you for that. All right, go ahead and give it just a couple more seconds. So if you haven't voted yet, please go ahead and do so. Got a couple more coming in. Okay. Jason, do you want to go ahead and talk about the results and let me know what you see here?
Yeah, I can do. So this, interestingly, the majority of people, so 50%, don't do anything. There's nobody looking at competitive CS services, which is not surprising, I think, given where we are. And then we've got an even split, kind of 21% between researching the services offered by immediate competitors and adjust their own services, which is really good. And then another 21% looking at researching both competitors and best practice from other venues. So there's a real split between not doing anything and then people starting to look at different types of research that they could do, which is, I think, what we'd expect. And I think we're going to see this as another poll that I'd be very interested in visiting again, perhaps in a year's time, 24 months time, just to see the shift. And I think, as we said with the previous poll, I think we will absolutely start to see more of a shift where fewer organizations are not looking at competitive services, and it actually becomes a core part of what a customer success team does. So really interesting results. It's got the split, I think, as we'd expect to see right now.
Yeah, and I think you're right that I think this is going to shift quite dramatically in the next year or two, and it's exciting people here thinking about this. And would ask too, as you go forward after this webinar and you start to think differently about this, or if you start to take action, please go ahead and add some thoughts and questions and comments in the LinkedIn group. We would love to hear what you're doing and what you're finding too. Is what you're doing competitive, and let us know how that goes. So Jason, go ahead. Another question for you then. Once you actually have a high impact competitive service, you've done some research and you've seen the importance of this, and you see that the opportunity if you get ahead of all this, how do you actually capitalize on this? How do you use this CS services as a growth driver?
I think this really is the crux of what we're trying to talk about here, isn't it? And this right now, we spoke, I think it was yesterday, and customer success as a growth engine and growth driver comes up in so many conversations with investors, with partners, with organizations today. people are really beginning to see it as that fundamental piece of a business, that engine that absolutely can drive growth, both for your own business, your investors, but also for your customers. So it's something that really is a hot topic right now. I think there are really two different aspects to this. One is the internal side, so your own internal organization, then external, and I'll talk about the two separately. I think we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but still my big belief, and I really stand by this, is that as a CS leader or an upcoming CS leader, part of your role is to make sure you are continually pitching customer success and the value of customer success internally with your business. There are still people that don't understand it. There are still people that have different priorities. You've got to help push that message across. So your role is there to make sure that message as to why we need customer success, the value that it's bringing to your customers, the value that it's bringing to your organization is there. So you really are there to continually do that internal sales pitch to your peers, to your exec team, to new people joining the business, to partners you work with, but really keep that message going out there. And I think that push includes internal alignment. So why are we doing this? Making sure that all of the goals and objectives for your own teams internally are aligned around customers, which go back to your business strategy aligned around customers. There's that whole idea about being more customer centric, and you really help push that. There's the internal understanding of what customer success is about. You said earlier on, Jason, we're still getting challenges. It isn't customer support. It's not customer service. It's not account management. But what is it and why is it different? So you've really got to be that spokesperson for it. And also the internal value proposition as to what customer success is delivering and why our customers need it. So make sure you can articulate internally what you're delivering to your customers, the value that you're bringing, and bring it back to terms that your other teams internally can understand, the metrics that work for them. You know, the ROI for it isn't just about the money, it isn't just about dollars, it's also about metrics around operational time savings, it's around efficiencies and services, it's about being proactive and understanding what your customers are doing. So you can really help drive those metrics. And I think you've really got to help your internal team look at what the value of customer success is as a growth driver. How do you use customer success to make your customers grow and get more value from them? And particularly at exec levels. You know, we've talked before, had some quite interesting and amusing podcasts that we've done around the sales challenges we've got. But there's a conversation, it was actually the Success Con in London last week, where we're talking about customer success is always about the next sale. It's not about new business, it's about the next sale. How do you ensure your customers renew? How do you ensure that they grow with you? How do you ensure that upsell comes in? So you are thinking about that continual sales cycle. So you've got to be aligned with your sales team, the sales execs, so they know what you're doing, they know where the responsibilities lie, but understand that value that's coming there. On the external side, I think you've got a similar challenge here, and I've been with a number of different organizations that, again, don't understand customer success. They see you as a salesperson, as a customer support person. So you've got to help educate your own customers as to why they need customer success, the value it brings, and why it needs to be a critical part of their buying decision. The quicker they get to see value from you and outcomes from you, the easier it becomes for them to understand the value of it in their buying process. And as you said, Jason, we've got to make sure that they understand where we fit in that buying cycle. And what we've got to do, really, it's basically about helping create that awareness and demand within prospective customers that their vendors and our competitors need to provide competitive CS services. I think you can absolutely have your marketing team help you here, and they can push the value of customer success in your team. They can use it through case studies, through advocacy, through interviews, video calls, and really help your customers and your prospective customers understand what you've done for customers, what has happened, the value that they've had from it. And it really helps bring down that risk to the buyers while increasing and accelerating the outcomes and values that they're getting. I think it's really critical to make sure your sales team are talking about customer success and why they bring it in, and talking about it as a differentiator for them. But at the same time, make sure that they're talking about it at the right level and they're not promising the world but not delivering on it. That delivery piece is equally critical, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes later. We're both big believers. I'm going to speak on your behalf, Jason, because I know we've talked about this at length before, but you need customer success to be involved in that initial sales process. Now, we're not advocating be involved in every single deal, You've got to pick the more strategic ones. Clearly, there are more resource challenges you've got to look at, but make sure you're involved in those key strategic enterprise level deals and some of the mid-tier ones, but you're involved at the latter stages. I'm not saying get CS in there to do the prospecting, to do this pre-sales work, but get them involved in the latter stages. Having customer success involved in that part of the sales cycle helps you close deals faster. It helps you win more deals, particularly because they're more competitive and it's a less risky process. It can provide an additional revenue stream. You can start positioning customer success as an additional service. That again is something that there's more discussion around that now. Then one of the key things that I really like is it starts building those relationships with your customers earlier, particularly for your enterprise customers. You're starting to build those relationships. Your enterprise customers have an expectation that they're going to have customer success, and they know the risks associated with not having customer success. So they have an expectation. They will want to be talking to somebody beforehand. So it helps with that there. And it really helps explain to the customers and the prospects how customer success, your customer success team and function are going to help deliver the outcomes and value that they want. We've said before, you can start bringing to life advocacy. You can talk about a case study as a CS professional with a prospect that you've had in there, that you've done it, so you know what you do. You can bring them to life, and that really brings a whole other dimension to it. It's not just marketing, sending out a survey, a case study. You can actually have someone that talks about the reality of it, how this has impacted a real customer that they've worked with. And I think competitive, high impact customer success services can also accelerate renewals and account expansion and growth. And faster outcomes deliver that faster growth. And that's something to really take into account, that the better you're delivering your customer success services, the more likely, and the value you're delivering, the higher the likelihood of a renewal. Or even if the renewal is unlikely, there are actions you can take before it happens, but you can also get in there and accelerate those expansions. I think that's really key to look at. And with that, we'll jump across to the third poll. So this is our last poll for today. And our third poll is, how often do you position your customer success services as a competitive differentiator during the sales process to help you close more sales? So again, never, infrequently, 50% of the time, often, almost always, or you're not involved in the sales process or you're not sure. So once again, how often do you position your customer success services as a competitive differentiator during the sales process to help you close those deals? So we'll give
and it looks like the results are coming in, so we'll give it just a minute here. Almost winding up. So go ahead and give us your quick vote, and then I'll share the results here. Okay. So it looks like for this role, some interesting results coming in. How often do you position CS as a competitive differentiator? We're seeing more. 33% said often, which is kind of interesting since it hasn't come up as much in the other polls. 11% almost always. We do obviously have quite a few saying not sure yet because they're not involved in the sales. And we still have 17% saying infrequently. So, more and more it's coming up as sort of a selling point, but it doesn't seem like it's quite there yet. But I suspect this one too will change over time.
I think it's really encouraging, actually, because I think we've kind of gone over that hill, if you want, and that a lot of these things are already starting, which is really good. So that kind of initial understanding of what it is out there, and it's something that we're going to see growth around that. Really cool, really interesting poll there. I think with all of these ones, we'd really like to do them again in a couple of months or kind of a year out and just see how the changes are. So really good. That's the three polls for today, guys. Jason, I'm going to push the next question back to you then. So when we've seen that split there between how people are and aren't positioning customer success there, but how do your customer success teams, how do your sales teams right now sell and position customer success today? And what do we need to do about how that needs to change in the future? So what are sales teams doing today, and how do we see that changing?
Yeah, it's interesting when I'm talking with customers and clients out there right now, there's still a whole bunch of questions around sales and customer success alignment and if they should charge for it, if sales should sell it or not, and do they have quota around it. And I'm still seeing that there's still a lot of confusion there and a lot of things not happening there. And I do see, though, increasingly, customers are getting more savvy, especially as we mentioned, as they're seeing the impact of other CS services from their alternative vendors here. So they're really starting to focus on moving from feature and function to achieving outcomes, and they're asking questions around that. And pretty much that means you've got to evolve your sales processes to follow suit. If your customers are asking more savvy questions, you need to get ahead of those questions and be prepared to answer them, and answer them in a way that puts you in the best possible light. And I think recognize this is a different type of sale. You know, I've worked with a lot of sales folks over the years, and many of them will need to learn a new way of selling, because there are a lot of folks who are really good at selling feature function. They can do these really slick, seductive demos of the software, and it really gets people salivating. But when your customers are saying, that's great, now tell me how we get there, and give me details and be specific how you get there, that argument can fall apart pretty quickly if you don't have a good answer. And I think also there are a lot of salespeople out there right now that when they're selling professional services, they're really focusing on technical implementations. You know, they're selling, you know, integration services, implementation services, and typically the people who are really their point for those are technical people who are like, okay, yes, this is the service I need. With customer success, you're selling a business service. You're selling a different type of professional service to a less savvy buyer, or to a less technical buyer. You need to speak with them differently. So I think you need to look at that. And not all sales folks are going to get there. And I think part of this means, though, that when you work closely with your execs and your salespeople, you've got to help them learn to sell the value of CS, you know, regardless if you're charging for your service or not. And you've got to also get salespeople to really think about and highlight to customers the risks of going with a competitor if they don't have a proven CS service. You know, one of the things I think about here is when you look at CS becoming such a competitive differentiator, if you are bleeding edge and you've got a great service and your customers don't know why it's important, you've got to be educating your customer on the questions they should be asking. You know, and in fact, that free guide that we put out there, give it to your customer and say, these are the questions you should be evaluating all your vendors on them. And by the way, here's where we stack up against it. And share that guide with your sales folks and say, these are the questions that our customers should be asking because we have such a great service that will help you win deals faster. Tell them to ask these questions, and here's how we stack up, and here's where we beat the competition. This will make it easier for you. And I think if you're able to arm and educate your sales folks with anything that's going to win the business for them and close it faster, they're going to start to work closer with you and listen to you a lot more. And I think then the flip side is, if you don't yet have a competitive service, this is a great time to go to your CEO and your CRO and other executives and say, these are the questions you need to expect that in 6 to 12 months, our customers are going to be asking to win deals. Right now, we're falling behind. We need to build this out. I need your support to get there. Here's what that looks like. Here's how we can get there. And use this as a means to prepare your executives for what's coming so that they know in advance, but also as a way to garner support for your CS services and for getting some alignment with your sales team. So I think something that can work really well. Share the questions, come up with additional ones, make some that are specific to your industry and your customers, but really highlight this is the direction it's going, and we're already seeing this in the marketplace, and this is only going to accelerate. We have a limited window to get there. So those are just some of my thoughts on that. You know, and I think, you know, Jason, this really comes back to you then for the next one here is, you know, how do you set the customer's expectations around customer success after the sale? You know, we sold it. Now, how do we deliver it there?
That delivery part, I mean, I've been in, you know, all my career has been about delivery and service delivery. And kind of been more removed from the sales process until the world of customer success over the kind of the last 6, 7, 8 years. But for me, it's always been about delivery. And this conversation, I love the way this has just flowed, Jason, because it is, how do we do it? How do we position it? How do we deliver it? And I think the key is, you've got our sales team aligned and they are positioning customer success as such a competitive, critical differentiator for us. What we're in effect doing is asking our sales guys to raise our customer expectations about the value and the format of our customer success services. So we're setting the bar very high, which we need to do. We've got to be very conscious against that, conscious of that. And we need to then engage in a way that we can deliver against these higher expectations. And it is something that you've got to do. The more aware of it you are, the better equipped you are for doing it. Our customers are really exposed, I think, in this day and age, to a wide variety of different customer success offerings, capabilities and approaches offered by all of their vendors. And this isn't just vendors that we're competing against, it's vendors across all of their life cycle that they're dealing with. And they're dealing with lots of them, as you kind of talked about earlier on, Jason. And you've got to make sure that you're providing effective customer success services that your customers need and that are a differentiator for you. But how do you keep doing that? I think you absolutely need to keep working very closely with sales to make sure that they are selling what you are capable of delivering, and don't sell too much, don't go over that line. And there's always the challenge there of sales teams promising the world, but you need that balance there. The handover process, and we've talked to this at length on previous podcasts. If you guys haven't heard those, please do. We'll share those again, but please do listen to those. But the handover process just needs to work. When you're onboarding your implementation team, get handed over from the sales team all of the information, the stakeholders, the outcomes the customers are looking for, the timings, the value they're expecting, the challenges, the risks, all of that needs to be documented, detailed, and come across at the right level. And I'd always encourage your onboarding and implementation team to be part of that process, to almost sign off that handover. And then when it goes then across to your CS team, make sure also that they're getting the info that they need from onboarding. And then as part of the onboarding process, you're bringing those guys in to understand it there. As part of that, I said earlier, you need absolutely to understand what your customers' outcomes are, what the goals are they're looking to achieve, and what does value look like to them. It isn't just about when they're live and using the product and logging in, but how do they know when they're getting value? And that can be a very difficult and alien concept for the sales guys to go through. So part of what we're trying to do is change the sales approach and help our sales team know how to better align and better question our customers to get that information to then pass across to us. I think one key thing that you need to do as well is you need to be able to get your customers to focus on all of their internal organization process changes that they're going to go through as part of the adoption and the drive of using your new technology. It is a big change, both at the user level, the company team level, and the organization level, but you need to make sure that they've got someone there that is a champion to help manage that change process, so that they can take all of those steps they need to internally to achieve the results they're looking to do. You also need to go through the process of running through with your customers journey mapping exercises, and a real big advocate of this, have your customers involved in that process. Do not do your journey mapping on your own. It's not an internal process. Yes, you can put some very high level frameworks together, but to get kind of a sign off, if you want, you need your customers buy-in, your customers feedback on it. So make sure you're doing that. And you may, if you've segmented your customers out either according to kind of an initial revenue type model or a more mature outcomes expectations model, do your customer journeys by the different segments there. And that, I think, is so important. So each journey knows what that type of customer is looking to do, looking to achieve, and the outcome they're looking to give. And I think one other thing that I'd be an idea to explore, and I don't think many organizations do it yet, is for them to have their own internal success team that helps drive their internal success with their software. Now, it could be a big ask. And again, it might be a single person who's the success champion within an organization. And it might not just be for your one tech or product, but that group then needs to work with your customer success team, but they're responsible then for driving that ongoing change and adoption. So it's absolutely related to that change management process, but also they're aligned to make sure your customers, make sure they and their internal organization are getting the desired outcomes they want. So that's a couple of thoughts there talking about that delivery side. Sorry, Jason, you were going to say.
Yeah, just to that last point about having customers up their own internal organization, that's going to be a large focus of the webinar coming up in October with Churn Zero, as well as we did some work with a client that was doing a large nationwide CRM project, and they brought us in 6 months before they selected their vendor to set up that team and get that going. So I think they had great success with it, and I think that more and more organizations, as they realize the need to get business outcomes, are going to realize that they're not equipped internally, that they're going to be looking for you as a CS team to help them with that. So if you'd like to learn more, join into that webinar coming up in October, or just reach out to me. Happy to share some more information around that.
Excellent. And our last question for this podcast, Jason, and I'll hand this one over to you before we step into Q&A. How do you make sure, so we've talked through kind of the need for it, how you do it, how do you benchmark your services, and then how do you deliver, but how do you make sure that your customer success services are continually evolving, getting better, and actually remaining competitive in the marketplace? So what are the steps you can do there?
Yeah, I mean, this is also another one that I find very interesting. You know, I was speaking with a software vendor the other day, and they said, you know, it's really easy for one of our competitors to replicate functionality we build, and we released some new piece that they'd never thought of, and within 3 months they had all coded it up and put it out there. That's a lot harder to do with a service. You know, your product, you code it and it's done, and you can test it and you can put in some functionality and you're good to go. And obviously it's a little bit harder than that with some things, but the services, they're so people dependent and process dependent that it takes time to evolve those and to figure out what's going to work. So you really need to go through and really make sure that everything you're doing is aligned with your market and with your software and with what your customers want. And one of the things that's great though, while it's hard to come up with a high impact service, it's also hard for your customers to replicate it. You know, the services are only as good as the people and the processes you follow, and they're constantly changing, and it's hard to replicate. So I would say, you know, at least annually, you've got to come back and start to do some market scans and continue to review both best practice in the space, look at what your competitors are doing, analyze the impact of your own efforts to see what's having an impact and figure out what you need to adjust or cut down. You know, and really look at that. Go also and ask your customers, you know, what do they find most effective? What is it that you're doing that's helping them achieve results they can't achieve on their own? What is it that they would love for you to provide? And what new things are some of their other CS teams from other vendors providing that they found effective that they wish you would provide? And really, where are they struggling now? And what sort of help do they need now? So if you have a customer that's just going live and trying to roll this out, they're going to have very different needs from a CS service at that point over the next 120, 180 days than a customer that's been live for 5 years and is just trying to roll out the next release and functionality or that's had some change in their internal organization. So people will need different things at different times. So I think you need to constantly review and adjust your services and operations based on this feedback, what you're seeing in the market. And I think the other important thing here, since it's so dependent on your people, you know, really looking through what are you doing to upskill and develop your CS staff? What are you doing once you have great customer success staff members and leaders to retain them so that they're not going off to a competitor? Because you know, if one or two key members leave, your service can go right down very quickly. So suddenly it puts new pressure on career pathing, onboarding, and ongoing development. Another shameless plug here, obviously check out csmastermind.com if you would like help with that, because it's such a critical issue here in being able to sustain an effective, competitive customer success service. So those are just a couple of thoughts real quick. You know, we've obviously taken up a little bit more time than we usually do with the polls, and it's been really great fun. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the Q&A box. We're happy to answer them in the few minutes that we have left. And Jason, you know, I see we do have one question here. Is there a best practice to share ROI metrics? You know, there's a lot of discussion in the customer education space for how do you show CS ROI? How do you show the value? And I'm assuming this means to both customers as well as to your internal executives.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there are the two aspects of it. One is internally, how do you show the ROI? So how do you demonstrate the value to your own business? I think you've got to look at what the costs are. So, and typically you've got kind of heavy resource costs with customer success. It consists of people. You've also got the technology costs, and then tie that up against how do you measure the value that you're delivering. I think that's something that is quite difficult to do. I've been through a number of exercises. In other organizations I've worked with, exercises where you actually do time tracking to see where the time's spent. Are you spending time as part of the cost of acquisition more on the sales side, or are you spending time on the cost to serve? So do you fit on the post-sales or pre-sale side? What I found time after time is that you probably spend a 50-50 mix. So if you want to know where to apportion your costs into the business, you can look at that. But I think you can start looking at things like what revenue allocation can you assign to the CS team? So with the involvement of CS in closing renewals, in expansions, I think if you look at the revenue that CS are bringing in versus the cost side of it, you can do some very basic ROI calculations. I know there's a lot of information written about it. I'm simplifying it vastly for the sake of time here, but I think it is trying to look at can you identify the revenue that CS have responsibility for bringing in? Do they have 100% responsibility or only partial responsibility? Then apportion that to the level of time that's being spent by the team on that as well. So it's a worthwhile exercise to do. As I said, when I've done it before, we've found traditionally and over a number of different times that you find your time spent between cost of acquisition and cost to serve is split fairly evenly. So starting point now, unless there's any things that show me otherwise, that's always the measure I go with. So that's my thoughts on that. I don't know if you had any ideas there around the metrics that you use, Jason. Maybe
no,
more from the customer side.
No, I think you've really done a great job with that one. And since in the interest of time here, I want to thank everyone for the questions. If you have more questions, please just go ahead and put them in the LinkedIn group or comments and thoughts on this. I think it's really fun to talk about this topic and see what new ideas come up once people start to hear this and go forward and give their own thoughts. So please post some thoughts in the LinkedIn group. And Jason, why don't you go ahead and close us out and let us know what's coming up in October.
I will do. So thanks very much for coming, guys. So don't forget, today we're talking about kind of, customer success as a growth engine. Our Be Bold challenge, and we'd really love your feedback on this, is what can you do in the next month before the next podcast to get your executive leadership team to understand that customer success needs to be that next competitive battleground and where they need to focus. And don't forget the three takeaways that we talked about earlier on. One is talking through how you deliver and develop fast, efficient, effective, scalable customer success services that actually beat the competition. How do you market, bundle, and sell your competitive customer success services as a competitive differentiator? And how do you capitalize on great customer success services? So they're the three takeaways. So we'd really love any feedback, any thoughts you guys have got. But again, thank you very much for joining. Our next webinar date is scheduled for the 15th of October. So at a similar time then, and the topic for this one is building and aligning your customer success services with integration and channel partners, and something again that we're seeing a big new kind of demand for these kind of services and lots of talk there. So really looking forward to that. Please do join us on the LinkedIn group, share your thoughts, conversations there. We'll share the links to the recordings there, and we'll remind everyone about a couple of the other ones we've done. But guys, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure.
Great. Thank you. Bye now.
Right.